In this next video, we're going to install Windows on our second virtual machine. So you'll locate your Windows 2008 virtual machine, or it may be Windows 2012, but this semester we're using Windows 2008. So I'm going to highlight that. Again, you can either hit the play button right here and click on Console to view your virtual machine, or my preferred method, I like to hit this little button up here at the top and get the pop out. It's a little less distracting, and you don't have all the noise of the vSphere console. So I'm going to hit the play button, and just like before, as soon as I hit that play button, I'm going to click my mouse in the screen and hit escape so I get the boot menu, and make sure I choose the CD-ROM drive so that I'm booting from the CD-ROM. I'm going to press any key to boot from the CD or DVD. If you miss that step, if you don't hit it quite fast enough, then you might have to start your machine again. So at this point, it should be starting with a Windows installation. So this will take just a minute or two. Okay, so we're ready to start selecting some options here. For me, the language is going to be English, United States. The US is my keyboard layout. I'm going to hit Next. Pretty simple. I just hit Install Now. And once you select Install Now, so setup is starting. This is going to take a minute or two, and then you should see it come up with a little GUI interface. It's going to show you, all of your options. So I'm going to do standard full installation. You could certainly choose one of these other options if you want to. For this class, we just need standard. The thing about Windows 2008 Server and the later versions, prior to this, usually you had to pick whichever one you had a license for. You really didn't get a choice. That the install media was basically which version of Windows that you would install. With 2008 and 2012, you can choose from the install media which version you're going to install. The other thing too is it's not going to ask us for a license key. In older versions, you had to put a license key in during the install process, but now we don't have to do that. So for the purpose of this course, we're just going to select whichever one you want to use. Again, I recommend just using the standard installer, so that we'll have Windows 2008 standard. I'm going to click on Next. You have to accept the license agreement for Microsoft. I'm going to click the Next button again. I can either upgrade or do custom. I don't want to do an upgrade. I already have Windows 2008 on my system. That's probably why it's asking me to do an upgrade. Instead, I'm going to do custom. And for me, I'm going to choose my my disk. I have a 20 gig disk. All of you will have a 20 gig disk. I'm going to choose that disk for my install, and it's going to warn me that there's already data and an operating system on that disk. I'm going to say that's okay. I just want to install anyway on top of that. So it's going to start copying all the files, and this will take a minute or two. Okay, so it got through copying all those files and extracting them, so it's going to restart. And once it restarts, it's going to continue the installation where it left off. And again, this restart will probably take a minute or two, so you'll have to wait for the restart. So I have two options that I can choose from. I'm going to choose 2008 server, the one that I was installing. This should just take a minute for this to boot up. So it looks like it's updating the registry settings. All right, we're almost there. Okay, so now we're at the last step, completing the installation. And this installation goes pretty quick, so it won't be too much longer. So we'll see this for a few minutes while it's taking some additional steps. So I'll pause this while we wait. Okay, so it finished, and it real quick came up and said it's going to restart the computer. You may have missed it. It went real fast. So it powered it off, and it's starting to come back up. So now we have just the regular boot screen for Windows. And in just a second here, we should start to see some additional options. And again, just like in Linux, I'm hitting Control-Alt to get out of the virtual machine to move my window around, and then I'm going to click back in the window to put Control for the mouse and the keyboard back into the virtual machine. So it's preparing the computer for first use. And once we get to this, so we have to create a password. So I'm going to click OK. So my administrator password, again, I'm just going to use Drexel. Now, unfortunately, with Windows, it's probably not going to let me use Drexel as the password. It's going to say that it's not complex enough. So for Windows, instead I'm going to use capital D R3X3L. So capital D R3X3L. We'll give that a try. So Drexel is, as you know, not very many characters, but by putting in the 3's in there and the capital D, it gives it a little bit of complexity. So Windows will take it. So I use capital D R3X3L. So the 3's instead of E's for Drexel. All right, so it's so now we're booted. We're in Windows. The first thing you're going to see when you first log into Windows 2008 Server is going to be this this Windows screen. Now we haven't activated our Windows, so it's going to run for a while. I believe with Windows 2008, it'll give us about 90 days, I believe. If we don't activate it within that 90 days, then it's going to, we're going to have some problems. But so one thing that I've seen some administrators get stuck with is they build a new server and forget to activate it, and then all of a sudden 90 days later it stops working, or some of the services no longer work. So it's a good idea to activate it right away. Of course, we're not going to activate it in this course because we're only going to use this for for probably 4 or 5 weeks in the course. So no need for us to activate Windows. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom and I'm going to say do not show this to me again because we're not going to need this. But one more thing I want to show you, I'm going to scroll this down. We ran the installer for Linux. You saw that it presented us with some roles that you could select, and Windows isn't unlike that. We can also add additional roles. So if I were to click on add roles, using this dialog, we can add things like make our server an Active Directory server, make it a Windows server, or a web server. So if I were going to make this a web server, I would just come down here and select web. And if I were to do that, when I hit next, it'll give me some options for a web server. So here's all these options for for Microsoft Web Server. So I might want something like ASP.NET. So I'll require, odds the required role services, and so forth and so on. You can go through here and select the options. Maybe I want the IIS-6 management capability for legacy applications or something like that, and then I would hit next. So you could add additional roles to Windows using this interface, and there are other ways to get to this screen, and we'll talk more about that later on in a couple weeks. But just showing you as an example. One other thing I want to show you before I end this video is you may want to install the tools for VMware. It makes it a little bit easier to work with the remote system. And I believe in our version of VM, we're going to go to VM, and there should be an option to install the virtual machine tools. So if you don't install the virtual machine tools, you'll notice that the mouse and the way the machine releases the mouse and all that stuff, especially with remote desktop connection, can be a bit kludgy. So so if you can, it's a good idea to install the VMware tools. But that's basically it. So from here, you can play around with Windows, and in 2 weeks we're going to do a little bit more with Windows. We'll do some exercises and just kind of do a brief introduction to Windows Server. And of course, there are other courses you can take for a much more in-depth background on how to administer and manage a Windows 2008 or 2012 server.